On the evening of August 1st, 2015, a 20-year-old man named Fraser Baloyi walked alone down a main road toward his village in the South African province of Limpopo. Fraser was on his way home from work. It was only about 7:30 p.m., and usually around this time, Fraser was used to seeing other people out and about on this road, but tonight there was nobody out there, because over the last 10 days, over 20 people in this area had been brutally mauled. The victims had all insisted that the creature that had mauled them was some kind of four-legged demon, and they had begun calling it the Beast. He looked up and saw the huge forest fire that was raging on a mountain miles and miles off in the distance. A few days ago, the fire had started. Fraser noticed the turnoff for the shortcut that would take him through some forest back to his home, and then he stepped off into the woods. He'd only been on this path for about 300 feet when he suddenly heard noises behind him. It was like a wheezing sound, like a sick animal that was breathing heavily. Fraser looked over his shoulder and he just saw nothing. However, when he turned back around and kept on going towards his village, he heard this loud crashing sound behind him, like a massive animal had leapt out of the brush and landed on the path behind him. He just started sprinting toward the village, and all he could hear behind him were these loud, pounding footsteps. Finally, he got out of the trees, back into his village, and he gets to his door. He's about to open it up. He feels this searing pain in his neck. This creature had leapt and grabbed onto him and bit down on the back of his neck. And so Fraser crumpled to the ground. He can see it's this massive black creature chewing on the lower half of his face. He just began screaming for help. His mother and other villagers came out and began smashing whatever this was with shovels. Fraser pulled away and dragged towards his house, and this huge black creature, it marched over to the edge of the tree line and looked back at Fraser and his mother and the neighbors. This creature may have the shape of a dog, but it was not a dog. South Africa has its share of wild dogs, jackals, and hyenas, and typically they're multicolored and fairly small, and this thing was jet black and gigantic. This creature just continued to stare back at them, and its eyes were not normal. They were too small and set at the wrong angle, and there was real sentience behind them. They were human eyes. His mother immediately dialed the emergency number, but the police told her they were not going to send people out there to deal with some dog. And so Fraser's mother decided she would just treat her son's wounds until this dog-like creature had left, and then once it had, she would get him a ride to the hospital. However, it didn't leave for hours and hours. Finally, in the morning, it was gone. The attack on Fraser was the last straw for the people of his village. And so the elders of Fraser's village went off on a journey up into that mountain that had that huge forest fire on it, and they were there for 2 whole days before returning to the village and telling everyone that they had successfully performed a ritual that had appeased their ancestors, and so hopefully now the attacks would stop. And sure enough, they did. At least 40 people in Limpopo had encountered the Beast at some point, but because it was never caught, there is no definitive proof of what it actually was.